The WNBA just exposed itself in the most shocking way possible. And what happened in the Indiana Fever versus Las Vegas Aces playoff series should have every basketball fan questioning the integrity of this league. This isn't about talent or competition anymore. It's about how the officials literally handed victories to certain teams while others got absolutely demolished by unfair calls. If you're ready to see the truth about what's really happening in women's basketball, drop a comment saying, "Expose them right now, because this is going to get wild." What went down between the Fever and Aces wasn't basketball. It was highway robbery disguised as playoff intensity. 41 fouls called in a single game, 16 in just one quarter alone. Players hitting the deck on nearly every possession, while the referees seemed to have their whistles surgically attached to their lips. But here's the kicker. Somehow, A'ja Wilson walks away looking like a hero with 25 points, while Lexi Hull played through a back injury that should have sidelined her completely, enduring punishment that would make UFC fighters cringe. The league wanted their golden franchise to win, and they made damn sure it happened. But that wasn't even the beginning of this controversy. Let me take you back to Game 1 when Indiana walked into Vegas like they owned the place. This was supposed to be the Aces' fortress, their unbeatable home court where championships were won. Instead, Kelsey Mitchell dropped 34 points like it was a regular Tuesday practice session. The Fever moved the ball with surgical precision, controlled every tempo change, and completely shut down Vegas' attempts to play their usual fast and flashy style. They turned A'ja Wilson, the newly crowned MVP, into a walking brick factory. 6 makes on 22 attempts. That's right, the best player in the league shot like she was wearing a blindfold. Indiana didn't just win, they embarrassed Vegas by 16 points in their own building. What happened next would shock everyone who believes in fair competition. Game 2 arrives, and suddenly the whistles start singing a different tune. From the opening tip, Las Vegas abandoned actual basketball for something that looked more like street fighting. Forearms flying, shoulders checking, bodies colliding on every single possession. The refs called it playoff physicality, but when you're watching players get bulldozed every 10 seconds, that's not intensity, that's orchestrated chaos. The Fever couldn't find any rhythm, because how do you get into a flow when there's a whistle every time you breathe? Vegas lived at the free throw line while Indiana got called for phantom fouls that even the announcers couldn't explain. Here's where it gets even more insane. Lexi Hull shouldn't have even been on that court. Her back was completely jacked up from Game 1, and most players would have been in street clothes on the bench. But Hull strapped up, popped whatever painkillers the trainers gave her, and went to war. And what did Vegas do? They targeted her like she had a bullseye on her back. Every cut she made, someone was there with an extra shove. Every defensive rotation ended with her on the floor. Every box out turned into a wrestling match. But instead of folding, Hull went nuclear from 3-point range, burying 5 of them to tie the Fever playoff record. That's not just basketball, that's pure defiance against a rigged system. The most disgusting part was watching how the officials let A'ja Wilson play like the rules didn't exist for her. Moving screens that would make offensive linemen jealous, forearm shivers that belonged in a boxing ring, and somehow she's the one getting every call in her favor. Fans watching at home weren't stupid. They saw exactly what was happening. Social media exploded with clips showing Wilson literally throwing players to the ground while the refs looked the other way. Meanwhile, if an Indiana player breathed too hard near her, instant whistle. The double standard was so obvious, it was insulting to anyone with functioning eyes. But the real tragedy here is what this means for the future of women's basketball. When Caitlin Clark was healthy and playing earlier in the season, she brought millions of new eyes to the WNBA. People who never watched women's basketball before were suddenly tuning in to see her magic. Now, with her dealing with injury issues in 2025, the league needs to maintain that momentum with fair, exciting competition. Instead, they're showing everyone that certain teams get special treatment while others get screwed. How do you grow a fan base when the outcome feels predetermined by the officials? What makes this even more pathetic is that Vegas needed all this help just to scrape out a win at home. Think about that for a second. The 2-time defending champions, with the MVP on their team playing in their own arena, needed 41 fouls and biased officiating just to beat a team that's supposed to be rebuilding. If that doesn't scream weakness, I don't know what does. The Aces showed everyone they can't win straight up anymore. They need the refs in their pocket to compete with hungry teams like Indiana. Aaliyah Boston's experience in Game 2 perfectly captures this whole mess. 13 rebounds and 10 points looks decent on paper, but those numbers hide the war she fought for every single stat. Constant elbows to the ribs that went uncalled, shoves in the back that the refs mysteriously missed. Body checks that would get you ejected in the NHL, but somehow were just good defense when Vegas did it. This is a third-year player getting abused like a crash test dummy, and instead of protecting their young stars, the league enabled it. Boston didn't just play basketball that night, she survived an assault. The aftermath revealed something even more disturbing about how the WNBA operates. When coaches and players were asked about the officiating, you could see the fear in their eyes. They know they can't speak the truth without getting fined or suspended. Christy Sides, the Fever coach, had to dance around the obvious bias, talking about finding rhythm and playoff intensity when everyone knew she wanted to call out the refs for their BS. Players like Hull and Boston gave politically correct answers while their body language screamed that they'd been robbed. This is a league that silences its own people from speaking truth. Here's what nobody's talking about, but everyone should be. The WNBA is at a crossroads in 2025. They finally have mainstream attention, corporate sponsors are interested, and viewership numbers are climbing. But if they keep allowing this kind of corrupt officiating, they're going to lose everything they've built. Casual fans aren't stupid. They can see when a game is being manipulated. And once you lose trust with your audience, good luck getting it back. The league is literally sabotaging its own growth for short-term narratives. What happened with Odyssey Sims perfectly illustrates the uphill battle Indiana faced. She dropped 18 points while getting hacked, grabbed, and fouled on nearly every drive. But here's the kicker. Most of those fouls weren't even called. She had to create magic out of broken possessions, fight through double teams with defenders draped all over her, and somehow still produce. Every time Indiana built momentum, a phantom foul would stop the game. Every time they got the crowd going, the whistle would kill the energy. Sims wasn't just playing against Vegas. She was playing against the entire system. The psychological warfare aspect of this is something else entirely. When you know the refs aren't going to protect you, when you know the other team can get away with murder while you get called for breathing, it messes with your head. Players start hesitating, second-guessing themselves, playing scared instead of free. That's exactly what Vegas wanted and exactly what the officials delivered. They didn't just steal a game. They tried to break Indiana's spirit. But here's the thing about this Fever team. They're tougher than the league gives them credit for. Remember, this is the same Indiana team that everyone wrote off at the beginning of the season. They were supposed to be lottery-bound again, just collecting losses while waiting for another draft pick. Instead, they fought their way into the playoffs and then had the audacity to punch the champions in the mouth on their home court. That Game 1 victory wasn't a fluke. It was a statement that the old guard better watch out because the new generation isn't backing down. And that's exactly why the establishment needed to put them back in their place with Game 2's referee circus. The free throw disparity alone tells you everything you need to know about how rigged this was. Vegas shot nearly double the free throws Indiana did, despite playing a supposedly more physical style. How does the team doing all the hitting and grabbing get rewarded with more foul calls? It's like watching a bully beat someone up and then getting ice cream for their troubles while the victim gets detention. The math doesn't add up unless you factor in that someone wanted a specific outcome and made sure it happened. But here's where it gets really interesting for 2025. With Caitlin Clark's injury situation keeping her sidelined, the Fever have had to evolve without their superstar point guard. And you know what? They've shown they can compete with anyone when the playing field is level. Game 1 proved that. They have the talent, the coaching, and the mental toughness to beat champions. What they don't have is the league's protection. And until that changes, we're going to keep seeing these disgusting displays of biased officiating. The media coverage afterward was almost as bad as the officiating itself. Every major outlet celebrated Wilson's performance like she'd just delivered a masterclass. 25 points, 9 boards, 5 steals, 2 blocks. Those were the headlines. But nobody mentioned how those numbers came from bulldozing through players while the refs looked the other way. Nobody talked about Hull fighting through injury to keep Indiana in the game. Nobody discussed the foul disparity or the momentum-killing whistles. The narrative was already written before the game even started. What really pisses me off is how this affects the younger generation of players coming into the league. When rookies see that certain teams get preferential treatment, that hard work and talent aren't enough if you're not on the league's favorite list, what message does that send? Why would the next Caitlin Clark want to come to the WNBA if she knows the deck is stacked against certain franchises? The league is literally poisoning its own future with this corruption. The silver lining in all this darkness is how the fans have responded. Social media has been absolutely roasting the WNBA for this obvious bias. Clips of bad calls have gone viral with millions of views. People who never watched women's basketball before are now invested because they hate seeing injustice. In a weird way, the controversy has created more engagement than a fairly called game might have. But that's not sustainable. Eventually, people will just stop watching if they think it's all predetermined. Here's my prediction for where this goes in 2025. Unless the WNBA addresses this officiating crisis immediately, they're going to lose the momentum they've built. Fans aren't going to keep investing time and money into a product that feels scripted. Players are going to speak out more boldly, fines be damned, and teams like Indiana, who've been screwed over repeatedly, are going to start playing with nothing to lose. When you back people into a corner, they come out swinging, and that's exactly what we're about to see. The question now is whether the league has the guts to fix this mess, or if they're going to double down on protecting their chosen franchises. Because make no mistake, what happened in that Fever vs. Aces series wasn't an isolated incident. This is a pattern that's been building for years, and 2025 might be the year it all comes crashing down. The WNBA is sitting on a powder keg of controversy, and one more match like Game 2 might light the whole thing up. If you made it this far, you're one of the real ones who actually cares about the truth in women's basketball. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because we're going to keep exposing what the mainstream media won't tell you. Drop a comment with your thoughts on this officiating scandal. Do you think the WNBA is rigged, or am I overreacting? Let's get this conversation started, because silence is exactly what they want from us. The more noise we make, the harder it becomes for them to ignore the problem. This is bigger than just one game or one series. This is about the integrity of an entire sport.